I live on an island off the east coast of Brisbane, Australia, with my partner. Let's call her Lily. Our house was a lovely mainland-facing house. The entire front of the house is practically glass doors and windows to fully appreciate the view. We moved to the island for cheap rent and to be closer to my Lily's mother. She supported us at the time while we were financially struggling. She was a policewoman of 9 years. My commute was minimum 2 hours to get to my job in the city, so in order to go to work on time, I would have to wake up at 4 a.m. My usual morning routine consisted of waking up, showering, coffee hit, getting dressed, waiting for my ride to the ferry terminal. This usually took somewhere to 20 to 30 minutes in total. Meanwhile, Lily is in bed asleep. Even though I wore heavy work boots and am all sorts of clumsy, the front door closing was one of the only things that would wake her up. It acted as an alarm for her to start her day, just as I leave to start mine. So cut to the morning of the incident. Normal morning, normal routine. I'm making my way onto the ferry when I receive a call from Lily. She was whispering in a hushed tone, which was very difficult to understand over loud ferry engines. "Hey, what are you doing home? Did I miss your ferry?" "What? No, I'm just hopping on now." "What do you mean? Are you not home?" "Huh? No, it's 4:30. I'm on my way to work. Are you okay?" There is dead silence over the phone. At this point, I'm starting to think the worst. I tell her to call her mom, to tell her to get over to our house ASAP. I get a faint okay and the phone hangs up. You may be wondering why I'm not calling the police at this point as well. On the islands, police don't even start until 7 a.m., and even then it's very unlikely to get a form of assistance. It's not incompetence, it's just plain lack of resources and manpower. The next part is told through Lily's point of view. Lily woke up to the sound of the front door closing. It's a large glass sliding door and it makes a distinct metal clicking sound when it latches shut, which it does so automatically or when you unlock it to open it. She assumes it's simply me leaving and snuggles further into the warm blankets, but begins to hear heavy boot steps on the hardwood floor, making their way through the kitchen, then slowly down the hallway to the bedroom. They go past the bedroom into the study. The study is adjacent to the bedroom. Think of a forked door, left is study door, right is bedroom. The walls are paper thin, so Lily can distinctly hear the door handle grinding its way open, with a very clear clink sound to signify you can't turn the knob any further. She hears the boot steps slowly walk into the study and what sounds like my computer chair rolling from underneath the desk, along with the sound of the seat depreciating into the floor as weight is being shifted onto it. This is where Lily assumes it's simply me returning home, as I usually would come home and sit down at my computer desk. She quietly whispers into the phone, "Hey, what are you doing home? Did you miss your ferry?" Awaiting a response, she took her ear away from the phone to listen to who she thought was me respond through the wall. Silence. She places her ear back on the phone and hears me responding with, "What? I'm just hopping on now." She explained to me how her gut dropped and felt heavy. Her breathing sped up and shortened simultaneously. I had never heard her speak of a time where she was more terrified than at that moment. I tell her to hang up and she promptly moves herself underneath the bed covers to obscure any noise she may make. She calls up her mom and begs her to come over immediately. She explained there's a man in the house. He is currently still in the study as there hasn't been any footprints leaving the room or even the sound of weight shifting back off the seat. 2 minutes pass and her mother is flying down the road that runs along our house and promptly pulls into our driveway. Here's a bit more info. Our driveway was at least 50 meters towards the house at the end of the block when you pull into it. There is enough elevation initially where you can see directly into the front of the house all the way back to the study and bedroom door down the end of the hallway. Her mum speeds down the house and hops out. She takes time to confirm the Hilux doors are locked and there's nothing in the tray that can be taken. She then proceeds to make her way into the house, making sure every corner is checked and any potential hiding spot is covered. Keeping calm and collected, she begins to do a literal police tactical house clear, moving from room to room doing a quick but thorough check, confirming that doors are locked, windows are closed, and rooms empty. She eventually gets to the study. The door is shut. No possible way to escape. One way in, one way out. She opens the door to find no one inside, but the desk chair is in a position where someone could have been sitting at it. She cleared the cupboard and checked the windows were correctly shut, She then proceeds to exit the study and turn left to open the bedroom door to inform Lily that no one is home, when in the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the glass sliding door opening. She sprints over to it and runs outside to nothing. No sound, no movement, nothing. I can clear as day remember her response when I called her asking what happened. There were no signs of entry, forced or otherwise, when I entered the building. No signs of someone exiting initially as well, although I do think someone somehow snuck past me. I found the glass door open wide after I cleared the house, but I remember the latch clicking shut. There's my story of the time some sort of extremely agile and sneaky intruder spooked and evaded my partner's police mother. A few months later, someone on the island was caught breaking and entering and trying to force his way onto unsuspecting women in the homes. Lily's mother said the case is different as the man only recently arrived to the island a week before being caught, but it still gives me chills when I let my mind wander. I moved into my house when I was 3 years old. It's big with 3 floors and 5 rooms. The only thing I didn't like about it was the neighborhood. Because you see, I lived a block away from the city's jail. Nothing too crazy ever happens, except this one time. So when I was around 9, I kept waking up because I heard noises throughout the night. My parents thought it was just birds or squirrels, so I didn't think much of it. One night, something else woke me up. Bells, sirens, from the jail. It caught me completely off guard, but what could I do? I was a 9-year-old boy. Sooner or later, my parents got wind of what was going on and told me to get back to sleep. Truthfully, I couldn't. The next morning, the jail incident was on the news. 3 policemen were held hostage during the night, and 2 prison mates escaped. One was found 2 hours later near the local park at 4 a.m., but the others were not found. That night, as I was in bed, I heard something. Not outside, but in the attic. Footsteps and heavy breathing. I wanted to run and get my parents, but the door to the attic is right next to the door of my room. Then I heard it. The faint creak of the attic door opening. I was practically crying at this point, fearing for my life. My only question was, how did he get in? We keep the doors locked all the time. 5 short minutes felt like 5 long years as the guy quietly walked down the stairs. I was able to make out the sound of him opening the fridge. Some time passes and he was climbing back up the stairs and into the attic. I didn't think it was safe to get my parents at that point, because at any time he could come out, and wasn't sure if he was armed or not. So I waited till morning. As soon as there was sunlight, I woke up my parents to tell them what happened. Immediately they called the police. A short time after, 3 police cars were in our driveway, and the search team was already trying to look for the guy. What the police and detectives found really messed me up. Apparently, the cellmate found a hole under our deck and was able to squeeze through a small tunnel leading to our fireplace. But the thing was, that thing was blocked off for as long as I could remember. He managed to climb up the fireplace and into our attic. That's why I could hear small animals during the night. The man was armed with a wrench that my dad must have left out the night the guy came. The man was originally put into jail for robbery, and now he's in prison for the next 15 years under trespassing and breaking and entering. I'm not going to say his name for legal reasons, but just know that no one got hurt. I don't think I was really young, maybe 16 or younger. I was on a ride north, probably Dauphin, with my father. He's a building inspector and an avid motorcyclist, and often has to make long trips within the province, or just over ones, so this wasn't any different than usual. I agreed to come along. Must have been a summer or sometime I got off from school and wanted to go sightseeing before everything was covered in a blanket of snow. The further north you go, the prettier it looks, and despite the huge amounts of graffiti scrawled on the smooth red stones, I've found the scenery gorgeous. It's not unlike a lot of Canadian roads to have several offshoots and hiking paths, and when nature called, my father tucked into a fishing trail and parked. We wandered a little way up to a camping site, a few logs situated around a fire pit and a stream nearby. I sat on one of the logs and my father went to go relieve himself. I started to pick at the sand around my feet and noticed something sticking out from under the log I was on. Foolish me didn't really think much of it. Rather, I was excited to find an ornate hunting knife. "Dad," I called out, certain my father was finished by now and was just enjoying the view from where he was. "Come see what I found." My father hurried up the slope shortly after hearing me and saw the blade. He quickly grasped my arm. I complained like any kid would at the sudden roughness I was being dealt with, but relented when my dad said, "Let's get back on the road." "Okay," I responded, quietly following him, while he still had a firm grip on my arm. From the brush on our left, we heard the weirdest squawking sound I'd ever heard, but with that, my father held me harder and began to tug me quickly to the car. "That's not a bird," my father informed me under his breath, and I think that might have been the only time I had ever seen such a stoic man so frightened. My rough around the edges tattooed biker father was running to the truck and towing me behind like a rag doll. Now, we obviously made it, got onto the road and drove to Dauphin and completed our business there and came back after an evening there. Nothing more was said about that until earlier this year. I'm 25 now. I said to my father, "Remember that time we went off the road to a fishing trail and we heard that weird bird noise?" My father chuckled an uncomfortable chuckle and told me this. "The knife you found wasn't the only thing there. I saw a bunch of bundled up clothes and food down by the water, like someone had been there for a while. I knew we were being watched too. People go missing out there. Sometimes people want to go missing. It's called being on the lam. So I knew we weren't safe there. That bird call was a signal for something." His explanation gave me chills. We were just average people going off the road to sightsee. We were so far up north in the middle of nowhere we could have gone missing and could have stayed that way too. Needless to say, my father hasn't gone too far from the highways to relieve himself on his long trips anymore, and honestly, I don't recall having gone with him on any of his trips after that. Whether it be related to this or not, I'm not sure. I was having a terrible time getting out of bed when I started 8th grade. Surprise, surprise, it was the onset of depression and anxiety. So my parents decided that I was to take the bus for the rest of the year so I didn't depend on my mom caving when I slept through my alarm and had to go to school late. It was go early or don't go. Being the absolute dork and teacher's pet I was, I agreed to this because I was terrified of missing a full day. I should also add I was in a very wealthy neighborhood that was very branched off from anything in our city. The only traffic to the area was either residential or maintenance vehicles and landscapers. Also, I was very small for my age. I was pretty behind my female peers in terms of developing and makeup and things of the like. I looked maybe 10 or 11 and I dressed like a 4-foot-tall IT guy. One day in late spring I got off at my friend's stop so we could continue a conversation we were having, as my stop was 2 behind hers. The walk to my house wouldn't have been more than 10 to 15 minutes. My friend and I parted ways, and I walked home in the opposite direction. It was about 5 minutes before I noticed a white truck that looked like a maintenance car had been following me pretty closely, stopping every 30 seconds. This was shortly after the release of the iPhone 4, so I assumed he was lost and checking his Maps app or something, as our neighborhood was full of loops, dead ends, and the such. That was until I looked back a few more times and realized he'd slowed down to a stop every time I started to look back. Being raised in the height of stranger dangers, my forget-this senses were tingling at this point. I started to walk faster towards the next left I had to make to get home. Maybe he really was just confused by a sprawling mountaintop neighborhood with ridiculously long driveways and just couldn't find the house number for a place he was remodeling or something, and would continue down that other road. No. He stopped, waited to see which direction I would follow at the fork, and went left after me. I decided I'd stop altogether and see what he did, as I was carrying a heavy backpack and a cello, was not about a haul at home for nothing. He stopped next to me and rolled down his window. "You dropped your lunchbox, dear. I have it in here. Let me give you a ride home." I never brought a lunchbox to school. I used all the force and intimidation I could find in my little 8th grade voice and said, "I don't have a lunchbox. Stop following me, you white trash. I have your plates." He looked very angry as I booked it and ran to the nearest house I could see people inside and watched him open his door. I violently rang the doorbell when a mother with 2 young kids came out and saw the look on my face and the man running after me and didn't ask questions. She shut and locked the door behind her as I made a point of saying that guy out there had been following me for 15 minutes and I do not know him. Please don't let me go back out there until he's gone. We looked out the window and he was getting back in his car, speeding off in the direction he came. Luckily, the lady didn't let me walk the rest of the way home just to be safe, and drove me back home, making sure he was gone first. I'm a 16-year-old student in Sydney, Australia. I'm 6'2" and I'm in grade 11. I was walking to the bus stop like I do every morning to get to school. I wasn't wearing a school uniform. My school lets you wear whatever you want as long as it's certain colors, with my backpack on. I was about 5 minutes away from the bus stop, which is literally like across the road from a supermarket called Kohl's. Keep in mind, I was walking and texting. Yeah, someone will give me crap about that. And as always, before I get ready to cross the road, I look left and right, so there's no cars. I checked left and right, and there was a car with these 2 men in there. I didn't really get a good look at their faces, but I could tell that they were islanders. Pretty sure that they were wearing those tradie shirts. So as I looked right, I saw them approaching close to me, so I waited to let them go. They were speeding, and I didn't want to risk it and run across the road. But they stopped at the last second before me and just stared. They weren't doing anything, they were just staring at me. I signaled at them to let them know that they could drive and I'd walk across the road after they left. They looked at me like they acknowledged that they could drive, so I waited a few seconds for them to go. They didn't drive. So I was like, okay, cool, I'll just walk across the road. But no, they decided to drive their car as I was stepping onto the road and nearly hit me. They stopped when I stepped back onto the sidewalk. So I stopped and stepped back onto the sidewalk and glared at them. I told them to just drive again so I could walk after they left. I walked a bit further up before crossing. Same thing happened. They stared, I walked, they nearly hit me again. This happened a 3rd time and my head was literally screaming, "You've read too many stories to know this isn't a coincidence. Get out of there." Even though it was 7 a.m. and daylight and I live in one of the friendliest neighborhoods. So after the 3rd time, I ran across the road. I just went for it. As expected, they drove as soon as I left the sidewalk, and obviously they didn't hit me. As I went to the other sidewalk across the street, they went around the roundabout twice, while staring at me again, before they burned rubber and sped off. This was from my time at university, when I would regularly be out at odd times and odd things with odd people would happen often. Since moving to London, that kind of encounter had not been a regular occurrence and is too minor for me to recall. I was living in an area that everyone would say was dangerous and was rough and supposedly had regular stabbings, but I'd lived there 4 years and never had anything super out of the ordinary happen to me, until I moved again. Where I live now has a reputation for being rough, but nowhere near a bad reputation as where I was before. But to put it into perspective, I had a moped in the other place for 2 years, and it was regularly left unlocked and had never been stolen. This new place, I had a push bike for less than 2 weeks, double-locked it in a supermarket CCTV parking lot, and was only in there for 20 minutes, and it was gone. So that's the kind of place I live now. There's also a traveler estate and council estate right next to my street, so that may also have contributed to the theft. This story comes from when I still had the push bike. I regularly biked from my house to the gym, which was a 12-minute ride away along a main road that eventually led to a motorway if you kept going after the gym. It was a winter evening, and a month prior had been fireworks night. It was still light out, so it was probably about 3 p.m., not at all late. I was riding the bike home and was almost there when this white, cheap old car with blacked-out windows rolls up next to me. It's pretty close to my house, so this part is 30 miles per hour speed limit, and we're coming to a roundabout, so not too weird for a car to be moving that slowly next to me. I pull tighter to the path inside the bike lane, but the car starts to drift closer and closer. At this point, I'm a little freaked out. I'm terrified of driving because, in general, other road users can't be trusted, and I hear horror stories all the time about bikers being knocked or squished against lampposts, but I keep going because as I approach the roundabout, my plan is to steer off the first exit into a car park in front of a general store. However, before I get to make the turn, the passenger window is being rolled down. For the brief second I have, I can see inside its car, full of early 20-year-old boys who are cackling maniacally. This freaks me out even more, but I don't get the chance to do anything before they're pulling a firework, lit, from in front of them. I have a millisecond to duck my head as this firework is directed at my face. I feel this projectile breeze past my face and explosions from behind me. I look up and the car is speeding off, around the roundabout and in the opposite direction. My heart is racing and I'm visibly shaking. I pull over past a bus stop. Thankfully I'm safe, I'm not hurt, and I didn't crash. It all happened so fast that I didn't get the reg of the car, but I called the police anyways. They don't seem to care much, and they say they'll send patrols near that area, ask for my address to provide more details to an actual police officer that they send. It's been almost a year, and I didn't get any police to come around and ask for more details, but yeah, possibly the scariest encounter of my life. The story takes place in a park called Memory Grove Park, an estate in the southish west with a heavy religious majority. I'll just leave it at that. People who were around the area during the Satanic Panic and beyond may or may not know that this place is a bit of a local legend due to stabbing victims being found here who were possibly caught in a ritualistic stabbing. The heavy presence of pentagrams all over the park. Don't know what I'm talking about, locals? Next time you're there, look at the stone ground by the memorials, and other generally creepy and culty stuff. I believe a Redditor has a picture of a demon they believe they spotted visiting the park after dark one night. If I can find the link, I'll include it. But anyways, my husband and his cousin had gotten drunk one night, and I mean when my husband got home, he was the most intoxicated I've ever seen him, and went to the park and the trails around it. He said they saw a noose hanging from a tree up on the trail, and that once they made note of the pentagrams adorning the ground, they saw a dark figure sprint at them, but they ran. Me, wanting to call bullcrap on what was probably two drunk dudes being babies, said that my husband and I should visit the grove around the same time, 2 to 3 a.m. the next day we had off. So, the next week we linked up with my husband's cousin, waited for 2:30 to roll around and walk to the park, approaching from the opposite side they did last time. No matter which side you enter the park from, you enter from above, and basically traverse down a paved and dimly lit hill with many turns and blind corners. We'd only made about 3 turns, so maybe like 50 yards, when we heard someone downwind from us say, "Hold on," to us as we approached a blind corner. As we rounded the corner, we saw a guy stopped, facing up the trail, putting something in a backpack, and a girl waiting for anyone to come down for some reason. We were polite and stopped to wait for the guy and said a brief hello to the girl, but she blocked our path to go down the hill. "You guys know about all the bad stuff that goes on here, right? Like, sacrifice is real. It's not safe when she is out there." We said we know, and we've seen it ourselves while collectively drawing a blank on who she was, though. The guy walked back up to her and looked very nervous. He started humming in a very low tone and began checking his pockets feverishly, as my husband grabbed my hand, dragged me down the hill past them while his second stoned cousin didn't seem to notice and kept up the conversation. It was when I was downhill from the couple that I noticed the large hunting knife the woman sported on her belt, as well as the man's switchblade peeking out from his belt. I know one when I see one, as my husband used to carry one when we lived in a terrible neighborhood. As I looked at them in a better light, I saw the man look nervous and tweaky, and the woman had a scrape on the side of her face, indicative of her probably being on meth or picking at her skin. "Guys, I'm being serious. There are very, very dark things out here," she said, and then mentioned again, "Sacrifice is real, guys. We found her living here. There's white dresses and nail polish all over the trails." At this point, all she is doing is sounding less and less coherent, and my husband is doing his very best to silently get his cousin to look at him so he can gesture to leave without any trouble, as the tweaky guy continued to look nervous and check his pockets. His cousin finally came down and joined us downhill from them, and we ran. My husband was convinced that they were going to try to mug us, and I was convinced if we had stayed any longer, the guy would have ganged up on my husband and cousin, and the girl would have come after me, and we would all be the next mysterious victims of the grove. We did make it down to the grove eventually, but the entire way down, we felt like we were being watched and something seemed off, so we left the park almost immediately, but not before we saw it, written in chalk on one of the monuments. "Take the baby from his mother and drink her milk." This happened back in the fall of 2016. I was a newlywed, 18, and moved halfway across the country to live with my husband. I was in a new town and had no friends. My husband deployed in the early spring of 2016. A few months into deployment, I was lonely and wanted to head home. I decided to make the 16-hour trek home, alone. I packed up my essentials and my cats. I left at 11 p.m. because I couldn't sleep. I was about 4 hours into my drive and I was growing tired. I pulled into a well-lit public rest stop so I could catch some shut-eye. I pulled my car into a spot right under a light and I made sure cars were nearby. It's about 3 in the morning at this time and I fall asleep. Next thing I know, I hear a knuckled tapping on my driver's side window. Sleepily, I wake up and see an older man, about mid-40s, kneeling down to my window. Stupidly, I open my driver's side door. "Please don't shoot me." I won't. What do you want?" "My wife and I are stranded here. We need money. Do you have some? Right over here." He points to the van parked in the dark off behind him. "If you want to follow me." No, man, I'm good. I don't have any money, I'm sorry." At this point, I'm beginning to feel like something is wrong. "Oh, come on. I swear I'm up to no harm. Come over to my van, my wife is in there." "Sorry, but I don't have any money. I'm using the rest of my money to go home." "All right, miss. Well, God bless. God bless." With that, he stumbles off to the next car on my right to do the same thing. By now, I'm wide awake and I'm feeling scared. I turn on my car and peel out of the lot. I don't know what he wanted. I didn't see a woman in the van he kept pointing at, but I didn't want to find out. So I just got home a little bit ago. Earlier, I decided to walk up to a gas station to get some snacks and drinks because I'm usually up all night due to my job and I was bored. As I was walking up this main road toward the store that I had planned to go to, a man walked out of it. As I was waiting to cross the street, I heard him yell, "Hey!" And then a few seconds later, "Hey, buddy! I'm talking to you!" I look over and see what's going on and realize this guy is looking and yelling right at me. So instead of crossing the street, I start walking straight ahead, and he starts pacing me on the other side of traffic, screaming at me. He keeps claiming I stole some scooter from him, and if he could cross the street, he'd beat me, and all sorts of other obscenities. I have no idea what this guy is talking about. I don't respond to him at all because I figure there's no way to de-escalate a situation with a person who is so messed up they've mistaken you for another person. They just keep screaming at me until I get to the next block where I turn in, then walk backwards another block, then start walking to where I wanted to go again, just in case they found the opportunity to cross the street. I have no idea how that guy figured I was someone that stole a scooter from him. I'm just glad the heavy traffic didn't afford him the opportunity to cross over to my side of the street. So my story starts during the summer of 2017. I was in South Africa for an internship. This opportunity was given to me by my school. There were about 15 of us participating in this program. We all lived together in an apartment, and friendships were quickly budding. Typically on most weekends, we would go out to Long Street, where all the bars were, and get food and then go out to the bars. This particular night, my friend A and I were doing our own thing, and were going to meet up with a bigger group for dinner later. Dinner time came around, and we went to meet them, and by the time we got to the restaurant, the kitchen was closed, so we couldn't order any food. A and I were fairly annoyed with the group because someone could have told us the kitchen was closing and ordered for us. So we were annoyed and decided to leave and told them that we would meet them at this beer house, that we all usually went to. We decided that we're just going to eat at beer house since they had really good burgers. We make our way towards beer house. It is probably a 10-minute walk to get there. Now, it's important to note that Cape Town has a huge homeless population, and you should never give these folk money because, more often than not, they will not use it for good. We were told that if we wanted to help, we should buy them food instead. Even then, some people have told us that they have seen people that just gave food to immediately turn back into the store or supers to return the food for money, and crime is no stranger to anyone here. Cape Town has one of the highest crime rates in the world. It's especially bad for tourists. So back to the story. So we get stopped by this homeless lady asking us for money. We made the mistake of talking to her for a couple of seconds too long. Up ahead of us, we see another homeless person, but this individual was very young, maybe about 15 or 16. He noticed that we talked to the other lady and asked for money, and we told him that we have none and try to walk past them. He continues to beg, telling us that he is so hungry and even just a couple rands, which is South African money, would suffice. We tell him more sternly that we don't have anything, and we see a change in his demeanor. We walk ahead of him and we see him crossing the street. We think we lost him and continue to walk towards food until we see him walking parallel to us on the opposite side of the road. We are at this point pretty sufficiently worried. We just try to ignore him, and of course, we are walking along the road that has no people walking and is not well lit. He starts running towards us and catches up, and he looks like he has something in the front pocket of his hoodie. He looks both A and I in the eyes and says, "Give me money. I'm a beggar and I have nothing to lose. I'll stab you," and flashed his homemade shank. In that moment, all I could think was, wow, I could definitely get stabbed right now by that very, very rusty knife, and I don't have insurance here and I'm going to get sick. I don't even care if I get stabbed, I just hope I don't get sick. And then my flight or fight kicks in, and I flight and low-key leave my friend slightly behind. We both run towards the only open store on the road, and the owner of that store had to be one of the most incompetent people I have had the opportunity to interact with. He was absolutely no help. We explained to him what was happening, and he just looked at us blankly. The homeless guy followed us to the store and was just standing outside waiting for us to come out. We stay at the store for about 15 minutes until he finally leaves. We quickly make our move and run toward Long Street since there are a bunch of people there. We get to the bar we are trying to get to and call an Uber and go back to our apartment. We were very shaken to say the least and just sat in A's room and ordered McDonald's. Yes, they deliver McDonald's in South Africa, and tried to get our stuff together. And that's the story of how I almost got stabbed, but could only think of how if I get stabbed, I'm going to get infected. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/letsreadofficial, and give and receive feedback from the community, and maybe even hear it featured here on the channel. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt.com. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.